us copies before we had a number of how many people, so they guess, so we don't have enough for every single person to have one. So if you've got somebody nearby that you can share.
Yeah, we can give one. And it's all of your
okay. Yeah, it's all on that flash drive. Yes, the PowerPoint. Anybody need one? Ingrid is willing to give one up here. Anybody else want one? Need one? Oh, yeah, behind you. Okay. So if it confirms something that the students know, they'll put a check mark by it. If it's new information, something they didn't know, put a plus mark. If it contradicts what you thought, like you thought something different, like you see a power in there that's written for Congress, but oh, I thought the president was the one who did that. You're gonna put a minus. And if you have a question about it, you put a question mark by it. So take a few minutes, maybe really just 1 minute, and look through, and again, you're thinking as a student doing this, what are some things that you would code? So once the students have actually done their coding, we might do something like a give one, get one as a debrief. Go and find someone else, tell them something that you marked as a check plus new, whatever it is you want them to look for. Also, you'd want to go over what actually they needed to know for the curriculum. So maybe a go through highlight. Make sure that you know Congress has the power to, it doesn't belong to somebody else. Answer any of those questions that they might have. In some cases, it might not be a question that has a solid answer. Maybe there's some room for discussion there. But definitely a debrief afterwards. They've looked at the primary source. They've actually read the Constitution as opposed to reading about the Constitution. Some people asked yesterday, what if you have kids that are not reading on the level that the Constitution is written? And I said, chunk what they need to know. Maybe you do a jigsaw instead. Maybe you add in some brackets that explains and tell the kids, we're looking at a primary source, but when you see this in brackets, that means I've added that in for clarity's sake. Maybe they need to go through first and highlight some vocab words. Maybe you have some vocab words ready for them that you can anticipate that they're gonna have trouble with. Any questions on this reading strategy? Yeah, yeah, I beat that into them this year. Yeah. Okay, so your performance assessment here is going to be to create a congressional vanity license plate. So you're gonna create a vanity plate that a senator or representative would use to brag about the power that they have. And the video, I found this, I kind of came up with this idea because I have a vanity license plate. And so when I wanted to go get that plate, I had to go to the DMV site and find, you know, what's my plate gonna look like, and what I want my plate to say, can it actually say that? So you can actually go to a personalized plate and you can check to see if the character combination that you wanna use is available. Yeah, okay, so they can actually go on and there's all kinds of options there for their special type of plate. They can choose their plate and they can put in the combination. So this has a little bit of kind of that creative thinking skills where they've got to think about how am I going to explain this power in 6 characters. And I actually came up with this to do for civics because I do it in US 2 with those people. So obviously, like Bill Gates, all those people that are kind of those modern folks, and you could even do it with non-modern, like in US 1. So let's look at these plates. So the first one there with the cardinal is the power, yeah, to declare war. How about the flag in you got job? What power of Congress is that? Go ahead, you can call it out. Yeah, the approving of appointments. And then, okay to spend. Yeah, with a little accent. Yeah, okay to spend. So approving the budget. Questions on any of this? Yeah.
It's just more for, I teach civics and economics also. If you have them do something like that, I was thinking of federalism. Do you find that they confuse who has the power to do that if they're putting go to war on a Virginia plate?
Yes, so you definitely want to say this is, so you're saying, in this case, I would tell them this is a congressperson from Virginia, and that's why they have a Virginia plate. And because we know that they have the ability to, we can go to that website and get that information. So yeah, definitely make it clear that this is at the national level. We're talking federal government. And that's a good point of conversation. Would the guys in Richmond be driving around, or ladies in Richmond have that on their plate? Probably not, because they don't have that power. The state can't do that. That's a really good question and consideration to make sure you clarify with the kids. And you could likewise, you may look at the other branches or other levels of government. So maybe what would the governor have on his license plate? What would a state senator, congressperson? What would your city council or county board of supervisors member have on their plate? Any other questions? And then when I made these plates, all I did was use the snipping tool to grab the plate from the VDOE website, because once or the DMV website. Once you type in those characters, you preview the plate, and you can see what it looks like. Just snag that, email it, put it in a PowerPoint, whatever, however your kids deliver that. And when I did it in US2, I didn't have them use the website, I just had them do it on paper. So Bill Gates had the Windows symbol on his license plate. So that was kind of neat too, another element of creativity. Go. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to the next unit of topic, right, of course, is the executive branch. So for this activity, right, you guys are going to need the Play-Doh that's at your station. So you may want to make yourselves just a little bit of room. You will need a sheet of white paper with you and your can of Play-Doh. And again, the numbers are a little different than what we had, so you might have to share.
It's okay to be excited that you're going to use Play-Doh. Like, you can go ahead and let that out.
All right. So a couple things first before you mess with the Play-Doh. So if this were in my classroom, you would have all gone out to wash your hands and come back. Because I teach 8th graders, and you know 8th graders, right? So I make sure that I have chart paper on my tables so that the Play-Doh is not on the table, because I think that's nastier than just the hands. And then everybody goes to wash their hands so that you have clean Play-Doh. It would be very easy to have the kids come in one day, hey, we need to talk about what the president does for us. There are 7 hats he wears. Here are the 7 and what he does in each role, right? I could certainly take ownership in that and do that myself. However, the kids aren't engaged in that. But you bring out your Play-Doh, and you say that you're going to learn about what the president does for us, right? And provide them with the information themselves and then have them teach it to their peers. They're instantly more engaged. So for this assignment, what they had to do is they're given a description of the president in each hat that he wears. Now, just as an aside, to be fully transparent, I could make this into a research assignment where they have to go out and get that information themselves, certainly. But for time and for the purpose that I needed it for, I didn't do that. I went ahead and provided that for them. So you're going to get a description as a table. Your job as a table will be to create a 3D Play-Doh sculpture of the president in that role, right? Something to symbolize the president in that role. I give the kids the freedom to choose to do one sculpture per table, and everybody works together on that.
Your
like this one up here. Right? The kids all work together on this.
Your table.
The kids all work together on this. Right? So, or you can do individual sculptures. Right? Maybe you don't want yours to be part of the whole group. you want to do something on your own that shows him in that role. At the end, we do a hosted gallery walk, which I'll explain to you in just a few minutes. So, number one rule, please don't make no Play-Doh. You can use color combinations like you see on the screen, but it has to be able to come apart cleanly. Because otherwise, y'all know I'd be just sitting here with a bunch of brown Play-Doh. So, please don't mix the Play-Doh. We're going to give you 10 minutes. We need one person to kind of appoint themselves as a leader to share the role that you've been given. And your job is to create a Play-Doh sculpture of the president acting in that role. Okay, so you're going to have 10 minutes to do your creation. What questions do you have? You've got, most of them it looks like are done, ready to be seen. All right, so you now know about your hat, right? Remember I told you there are 7. So there are 7 hats. I need for you to know all 7, not just the one you were given. So to get my students to get that information, instead of coming from me, they have a hosted gallery walk where they get up, they move around the room, and they visit each station to hear about what the president does in the role and to see the 3D model that their peers have created. It's called a hosted gallery walk because you leave one person at your table to stay stationary and act as the host as the kids move around. So their directions were to, first of all, I was really mean. I'll just go ahead and tell you. I took back those slips because if I didn't, they're middle schoolers. They would have set this slip right on the paper and they would have not had to talk or engage at all, and they would have just copied from that piece of paper. So I took the slips from them, and the host, right, had to stay and be able to explain it. They shared what the president does in that role. They shared how their 3D model exemplifies that role. And then last, they shared the title of the role. And the reason for that is I didn't want this to take all day. There is a lot that they need to know about each of these roles. So what I did is on their recording form, I had descriptions. They only had to listen for titles. Because otherwise, they wouldn't know exactly what they should be writing down versus not writing down. They might be missing information, etc. So I gave them the bulk of the content, but they didn't know the titles of the roles at all. So you can see in this video clip, you'll see one of my groups let me film them. So this is Caleb and Michael's group, right? So Caleb was the host.
Hi, that's for the military.
Oh, hold on.
The president is in charge of the U.S. Armed Forces, and it's called Commander-in-Chief. And Michael's is supposed to be a bomb and like a nuclear symbol. And it's so because he can decide where to bomb foreign cities. And mine's a guy that's for the military because the president is in charge of the U.S. Armed Forces.
Okay, so on their recording form, all they had to write down was Commander-in-Chief. They already had on there head of the armed forces, can help make military decisions, that kind of stuff. This is a really good way to engage those more reluctant learners. You'd be surprised once you said, well, you're going to be the host, right? I need for you to make sure you can tell this to your peers. That table was a table, I'm going to preface it with I love Caleb and I love Michael, but that was a table I spent a lot of time at because they needed some supervision. His bomb was questionable at best. It looked a lot less like a bomb and more like something else at the beginning of this activity. So I stayed there a lot. So I really needed for them to step up. And so I appointed Caleb. He didn't get to volunteer to be the host. I needed for him to be the host, right? So he did that for me. When they have peers expecting them to share something, you'd be surprised at how good of a job they will do for you. Now, we didn't follow directions exactly, right? I had on my board, first, share the description. Second, how does your Play-Doh 3D model meet that description or exemplify that description? Third, tell me the title. He went off script a little, but it's okay. The kids still got what they needed to get from him, right? The hosts are gifted with a filled out copy of the notes because that was a concern. If I'm going to be the host, how am I going to get everybody else's? So normally I try to pick really strong students to be the hosts, ones that I know just by reading the information, they're going to have an understanding of the titles and their descriptions. And then I follow it up with some direct instruction. I go back over it with my notes, with my presentation, to make sure no one has any questions, and then we close with an exit ticket. Give them a scenario, which hat is the president wearing in this scenario, kind of thing. Continuing our journey through the executive branch, we talk about executive orders, right, as a power that the president has. And in this day and time, that's been in the news quite a bit since Trump has taken office, because he's issued many executive orders. So the guiding question is, should the president have this power, right? Where in the Constitution does it say the president has this power? So we start with, as an introduction to executive orders, we start with one they know. The only executive order that they know, and probably that the majority of people know or would recognize, would be 9066, right? Anybody happen to recognize that right off the top of your head? What was that order? Do you remember? Japanese internment. I know my 7th grade teachers teach about this executive order. So we go with something that's familiar. So we give them the primary source document. We give them an actual copy of the executive order, and we just have them do an I notice, I wonder, I have these questions activity. So they get to mark it up and really look at the language of the order. After they see the order, they've had a chance to interact with it. I found a really great video from Franklin Roosevelt's library that reviews this order. So as you're getting that paper, the primary source, I'm going to go ahead and play this and let you guys watch it. It's only a couple minutes. Okay, so we examine this through a historical lens, so they get a sense of what an executive order is like. We have a conversation. What hat is the president wearing when he does this, right? What does it mean to enforce laws as part of the executive branch? So we had the kids do a cost-benefit analysis to this decision to issue Executive Order 9066. And what I really like about it is the bottom part, right? So they do look at the costs and benefits at the time for issuing the order, but I really like them thinking about those unintended outcomes that came out of this, right? And so once they're familiar with an executive order and they've kind of, got that in there, they brought it forward from their schema, they're remembering probably their conversations. As we get ready to ask them to make an opinion, should presidents be allowed this power, they complete a DBQ on executive orders. So you're getting a hard copy of that now. We use ThingLink for this. The claim to fame, I guess, for ThingLink is that it lets pictures come to life. So it lets you embed links on a picture. So this is a picture of President Trump holding up an executive order. And when you click on the button, it takes you to that source, right? So we're 1-to-1 in our division. So the kids can do this at home if you want to try the flipped classroom model, or they can do it in class on their computers. I'll tell you, I've done it both ways. It was not at all successful at home. The flipped model, I thought, this is going to be great. They'll do their DBQ, they'll come ready for conversation in class, and that was not the case at all. So last year, I did this in the classroom because we really try to vertical team, if you will, as much as possible. I usually reach out to my 2 feeder high schools and ask them, what do you see our kids struggling with? What can we help them with in 8th grade to really get them ready for high school? And over the past 2 years, it's been consistently thesis statements. I never would have thought of that. But thesis statements, they're seeing kids really struggle and not know how to write a proper thesis. So they kind of shared with us a rubric, right? Should be 1 sentence, should restate the prompt, should have 3 reasons of support to their argument. So we use that as our rubric to create thesis statements, which is the outcome of the DBQ. So that's their performance, if you will, right? Remember, that's a continuum. So their performance for me is writing a single sentence, a strong thesis statement, stating their opinion on should presidents have the power to issue executive orders. You guys have the copies of the sources there to look at. The one I think that's my favorite, that's going to be hard for you to see on the screen, is this one. It's updated often. It has a list of all of the presidential executive orders for each president. So it just provides a really great source for them to ask some really good questions, right? So they might notice George Washington hardly issued any at all. But then they might notice that Franklin Roosevelt had over 3,700, right? So you can have conversations about why that might be. The other source that I really like for this is there's a Scholastic News article, Can a President Be Too Strong? It doesn't really mention executive orders. So the kids are having to transfer that debate reading into executive orders, right? Does having the power to make executive orders, does that constitute strength in a president, weakness in a president, et cetera? So you have the sheet on the front that they fill out as they go through and answer questions from those documents. And then again, their performance task, if you will, is that thesis. We paired up with the English teachers. We called it a thesis throwdown, right, to make it a little competitive. And we had the English teachers pick the best thesis from the submissions based on this document. And I'm just praying those high school teachers this year say they see a difference, because we did a lot of thesis statement writing. And it could certainly be taken into a bigger PBA, absolutely. They could write an essay on this. I didn't have the time for it, to be honest with you. I just needed them to write the thesis. But that could certainly be something that you want to expand on and take further to differentiate. All right, so that was just basically what I just said. Any questions on executive branch?
Somebody asked yesterday about the amount of time that this would take. And I said, well, it kind of depends on your students. If you're crunched for time too, this would be something you could easily jigsaw. So set up your expert groups, have them work individually, go to their expert groups, and then put a mixed group together where they're kind of swapping the questions or the answers in their jigsaw group.
Before we fully transition and leave the executive branch, I do want you to get the chance to see the creations that you guys made, because they're just awesome. So if you'll take, we're not going to do a hosted gallery walk because we don't have time for that, but if you can take like 2 minutes to just kind of get up, leave your slip on your table so they understand which hat the president is wearing, and just quickly rotate through so you can see everybody's Play-Doh creations before we clean that up. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so lastly, the judicial branch. If your district happens to subscribe to Upfront magazine, or maybe your English department does, you might have seen this before, but also published on the New York Times website was a list of the top 10 Supreme Court cases that young people should know. And it includes a lot of the Tinker case. It includes a lot of things that are relevant to them as students, as young people. So they're given a description of a case. Again, you could turn it into research. You could direct them to a specific resource. You could, leave, depending on, your students, leave it all open. But they research the case or are given kind of a rundown of the case as a table, as a group, and they create a poster that teaches their classmates about the case. So they've got to talk about, what was the conflict, the name of the case, conflict, all that stuff, and illustrate it in a poster. If you take a look at these top 10 and you think that there's some other case that you know of that your kids would connect to, add it in. Or, take some out that are there, adjust it to fit.
And I would just say one quick thing, poster paper can get really expensive, right? But it's important that it's big so everybody can see it. So for like 20 bucks, I think it was, I went to Lowe's and bought shower board, and because I said I was a teacher, they cut it for free. So I had them cut 4 by 2, right? 2 feet by 4 feet, giant whiteboards. And no matter what I do in my classroom, if I say go grab a whiteboard, already their excitement is up because they know they're going to get to write on the whiteboard. And it takes up my entire table because I have tables in my classroom. So my kids do this on their whiteboard versus poster paper, and then it's just lying there for the gallery walk to go around. But if you're thinking money, that would be a good investment over reams and reams and reams of that big giant poster paper.
Right. Yeah, I go and get the stuff that's supposed to go on the bulletin boards that's like in the teacher's lounge, that's just out there, and tear some pieces off. And my kids would actually like clear space on the floor and be laying on the floor doing this at the same time. I mean, that's, and there's something about actually creating it with markers and, you know, cutting stuff out that's more than just, I mean, certainly you could have them do this electronically as well. But then they're going to complete a gallery walk. They're going to read from iCivics this rundown of Marbury versus Madison. Did you have this up here already? Are you using iCivics already in your classroom, civics teachers? If not, it's a great little resource. Lots of just 1 or 2 pagers that runs down the case or the branch of government, whatever it may be. So in this case, they're going to read about Marbury versus Madison, particularly looking at the case, and then this idea of judicial review. So they're going to walk around and look at the posters, and they're going to evaluate the court cases and decide then, is this case an example of judicial review? Why are they all federal cases? Is judicial review involved? And in each case, it's an example of judicial review. But as the kids are looking at it, they've got to think back to what is the heart of the case and what is judicial review and does this fit? So in their mind, they're solidifying, and surprisingly, they might come up with an argument why they think that a specific case is not judicial review, even though they all are in the end. Questions? All right, can you hit the mouse?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay, so now the application part. Thinking about all of these, and again, these are just some snippets of activities. There's other direct instruction involved. I'm still giving a quiz on the 3 branches of government. I'm still giving, teaching those checks and balances and giving them a quiz on that. All of those things still apply. We've just added some little extra engagement activities, some stretching, those sort of things. So with your table, talk about some of these questions and be prepared to share. How do these activities prepare students for the current SOL assessment? Do they? How do these activities prepare students for a local alternative assessment? So whatever that may look like in your district, because that's a district decision, and maybe we don't know what that's going to look like at this point either. So how do they prepare them for that local alternative, that performance assessment? And then how could you apply these activities to your own classroom instruction? Take a few minutes to talk with your table about that. And you may have talked about this kind of off and on as we've gone through the session, but take a few minutes, especially concentrating on current standards and an assessment, and then those performance-based assessments.
We're going to ask for volunteers to share out just a couple of the things that you guys maybe talked about at your table. But if you can wait before you share, let us know if you're willing. You're going to get mic'd.
So somebody share what your answers to these questions. How do these prepare them for the current SOLs? Do they? And then how might they prepare them for that local alternative, the performance-based assessment? Tamika's got something right here. Tamika, right? Okay.
Well, we're lucky in, wait.
Just talk.
Okay. We're lucky in US1 that there's no longer a state assessment, so we've been able to bring the fun back to history. Yay. The activities, though, would be wonderful. We do district portfolio, and the children are allowed to choose the artifact that they want to put in there. So to be able to take these back and show this to the kids, and it's going to be awesome and give us a wealth of resources in that sense.
That's super. Anybody else?
These activities really tap into the different modalities of children.
You're not just going and giving them, okay, I'm lecturing, we're taking notes, we give them a worksheet. Okay, let's take this study guide, and that's why I'm going to have you study. We got them working in it, hands-on, dirty, working with it, manipulating, and that's what that is. I'm so happy. Bringing the fun back in history, bringing history alive.
And what I love too is with that balanced assessment idea, we're getting dirty in there with the Play-Doh, and the kids led 90% of class that day. I followed up with the last 10 to 15 minutes to make sure everybody got it, and I could give a quick formative assessment of it. And so it's just a different way to teach it, but the outcome is still very much the same, and then they remembered. What I tried to do, I should have thought to put that worksheet up there, is I took snapshots of their creations, so then when I'm giving them assessments, I might throw that picture up, right? It's not gonna be exactly the same as what the description might be, but something as a cue to remind kids about what it is, and it's their creation. They love seeing their stuff anywhere. If you'll talk about them, or brag on them, or show their stuff, they love it. You know that, you're middle school teachers. So this really lets them shine in that regard. How about the last question? How could you apply these activities to your own instruction? Anybody want to talk about that?
I'm sprinting.
We just created a maker station at our school library, and the teachers are scared to death of this thing because all you see is just all this technology. No one wants to break the 3D printer. No one wants to be that teacher.
Right. Understandable.
But Play-Doh, I can break Play-Doh all day long and then just put it back in the container. So the first thing I'm going to do when I get back is ask, can we add some things like this to the maker station that aren't quite as intimidating as the 3D printer Cricut machine that y'all have over there.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of nice, low-tech stuff that we can afford to do.
Right.
So.
And I will say, somebody asked last week in that first session, how much money am I spending a year on Play-Doh? Well, I bought the 36 count from Amazon 3 years ago. I'm sorry if that skeeves you out, but I tell you what, they wash their hands. But I bought it 3 years ago. Yeah. So it seemed to be good. I was a little unsure, but it seems like I can make it go a fourth year, right? Yeah. And then I can probably toss it and get some new, but you know, it's worth it.
And several years ago, you know, when you're getting ready to prep for the tests, the office manager calls and says, you know, what do you need? And I said, I need some 3x5 cards and I need some Play-Doh.